Hello students and welcome to the lecture. So students, as we know that we are covering the National Disaster Management Authority. Alright, this is the topic that we are covering. In the previous lecture, I had given you the overview on the name also. Like this is the authority, this is an organization that is doing the management of the disaster at the national level. Right? That is what we had discussed. After this, these are the topics that we have scheduled for the discussion under this particular series, like starting with the definition part, then disaster happened over time, causes of disaster, impacts of disaster, elements of disaster management in India, establishment of the NDMA, objectives of the NDMA, functions of the NDMA, thereafter the additional functions and the responsibilities of the NDMA, the State Disaster Management Authority, and the District Disaster Management Authority. Okay, so these are the topics that we have scheduled for the discussion. If we talk about the topic that we have covered so far, so basically we have done with the definition part. That is the topic that we have covered. The topics we are left with: disaster happened over time, causes of disaster, impacts of a disaster, elements of disaster management authority, establishment of the NDMA, objectives of the NDMA, functions of the NDMA, additional functions of the NDMA, State Disaster Management Authority, District Disaster Management Authority. Okay, so this is the picture that we have created so far altogether. All right. I hope that you have revised the previous lecture in the valid enough manner before you have come for this lecture. As many times I have told you, that is for your own benefit. So if you are doing this on the regular basis, the thing will be much more beneficial for you. If you are not doing this, the thing will be harsh for you. That is totally honest. All right. So let's start with the disaster definition. Okay. Like in the previous lecture, we had seen the definition of the disaster, that it is an unforeseen. It means that it is unpredictable. No one is already knows that on which day, on which time the disaster is going to be happening. Okay. That happens all of a sudden. Unforeseen. Catastrophic means that the disaster is that much of immense that it could cause a severe damage. Okay, like the severe damage, loss, and even the destruction. Okay, on the both the people and the property. Okay, so now you could conclude like how powerful and destructive the disaster is. All right. Harm caused by disaster is immense and basically varies based on the factors like the location of the place where the place is located. Okay. Climate, like what is the climate of the place. All right. Type of terrain. It is a plain area, mountain area, plateau area, forest area and all. And vulnerability. Like on the basis of these factors, how vulnerable the area is as per the cause of disaster. So these factors basically determine like how harsh the disaster could be for that area. All right. And thereafter we know disaster could impact the socio-economic life. Okay. Like people generally lose their livelihoods. People generally got damage in the perspective of their properties. Even the disaster claims the life. Economic, because of the property. Political, as I have given you the example. Like basically, if there is any ruling party that got failed managing the disaster, then ultimately the support of that political party would be get low. Cultural, like we had take the example of ethnicity, human cultivation and all, and of course the mental health. Okay. Thereafter, we know the disaster could be categorized into the two forms, natural disasters and the man-made disasters. And man-made disasters oftenly known as the artificial disasters. Okay. So that is the thing that we have covered in the previous lecture. I hope that you have revised the previous lecture in the well enough manner. Now, let's move forward. So if we talk about the natural disasters, if we talk about it, okay, so by name, we could conclude that basically the cause behind the occurrence of that disaster is natural. Okay, it's natural, it is not caused by any human activity. Okay, however, indirectly that could be, but not directly. Okay, natural disasters. All right, the natural disaster encompass all the forms of severe weather and natural phenomena. Okay, so these two are the main components of the national disaster, and you can say these two are the main reasons behind the occurrence of the national or natural disasters. Okay, they can pose a significant threat to the property of the people. Okay, infrastructure of the people, and even the public safety. Why? Because whenever the flood hurts, whenever the earthquake happens, whenever the volcanic eruptions happens, so generally who is going to be sufferer? The people living nearby it, right? And the people that had become the victim of that particular thing, they will be suffering, right? So that's why it could poses a threat to the public safety also. Disaster often lead to the periodic instability. Periodic instability means like it is not forever, it is not eternal. Okay, like we can take an example. Suppose you are living in a village, then the flood hit your village severely. That flood had impacted negatively on the property of the village, or you can say on the properties of the villagers, infrastructure of the village, and even the public safety was impacted badly. Okay, but what do you think? That would be eternal. Like if the flood had hit the area on 12th July 2002, that was the example that we had taken in the previous lecture. So after 12th July 2002, forever the things will be same. No, disaster occurred, but for a short duration. However, the impact could be there for a long duration. All right. For example, the flood would be there for days, in some cases for months. Okay. Volcano eruption for days or even for some hours only. Same with the earthquake. Earthquake could be for hours only. So you can say the occurrence of the disaster is shorter. Okay. That could be occurred only for a few time or only for a few hours or days, not forever. But the impact that the disaster has left behind, that could be there for a longer duration. Okay, so the impact and the occurrence together could generate a periodic instability, like in the case of village in which you were living. So when the flood will hit, the flood will be there for days and for the months. All right, whatever you can say. So when the flood would be there, the situations will be worse, you will be suffering. All right, and when the flood would be resolved, then only the situations could be calmed down, the situation could be turned back to the normal, but that will take a time. The crops that had been damaged, that could not be raised again in shortly. Okay, the animals that got affected, they could not be put normal in a short duration. The people who had lost their family members, who got injured during the flood, they will not be so normal in a short duration. They will take time. The homes and the properties of the people that got affected, that could not be put back to the place in a shorter duration. All right. So it means that for a certain time period, there will be instability. Okay. And that is also known as recovery period. So disaster often lead to the periodic instability. Okay. On the periodic basis, they instables the things, they damages the things. Thereafter, disruption. Like when the flood is there, the normal roads, the normal ways to reach the village, that will be affected. All right. So the relief material could not be reaching you that easily. Even if we take the example of forest fire, suppose your village is in the forest, okay, and then the forest catches the fire. So the first thing is there, like you won't be able to escape the forest that easily. Why? Because of two reasons. First, that you belong to that village, you have the system there, like the property, like the livestock, like the crop field and all. Second, when there is a forest fire, it means that there is a threat in going to the forest. When you will go to the forest, might you get hurt, right? So there is a disruption. You could not that easily move as you could before the occurrence of that disaster. Okay. And of course, the financial loss. Okay. So periodic instability, disruption, and financial loss could be caused by the disaster in the affected areas where the disaster had occurred or had impacted. Thereafter, if we take the examples of the natural disasters, the first is the volcanic eruption. So basically occurs when magma, gases, ash escape from a volcano. Like basically, if I tell you this, then if just you are required to imagine the situation. Okay. Just try to imagine the situation. There is Earth in which we are living in. Okay. Earth having the three layer. The topmost layer is the crust on which we are living. Second layer is the mantle, and third layer is the core. So basically, the between the crust and the core, there lies the mantle. And beneath the earth, the temperature is higher. Because of this, the things that are inside the earth, they are in the liquid form, molten form. All right. And basically, you can say the volcanoes are the exit for these things to come on the surface. All right. They are the ways. So basically, whenever the volcano erupt, so basically the molten material beneath the earth came to the surface by the help of the opening provided by the volcanoes. All right. And that is what we called as a volcanic eruption in the normal terms. And whenever the volcano erupted, basically the magma, also known as lava sometime, that is the very, very hot molten material form that comes on the surface. Okay. And that could harm each and everything, not only the property, but also the life of the people. Along with the magma, some gases also erupted out to the surface. That could be a poisonous gases and the harsh gases. And these gases could impact the human health in an adverse manner. Along with the ashes would come out, and the ashes could disrupted the vision. Because of this, the people find it difficult to move here and there during the volcanic eruptions. All right. So these all things, magma, gases, and ashes, these all three things, escape from the volcano towards the surface, and that causes the widespread damage to the surrounding area and effective air travel and climate. Like the surrounding area, when the molten magma, the gases, the ashes would come out. So basically they will starting spreading here and there. All right. And nearby people who are living nearby the volcanoes, they got affected because they found it difficult to survive in that particular environment. And when the ash would be there in the sky, so basically the air travel, it means the aeroplanes that were flying over the volcanoes, they lost their vision. They won't be able to fly that easily. Even the molten magma raises the temperature. So because of this, the plane system could get some technical difficulty because of the high temperature in the air. Okay. Climate. Why climate? Because when the gases, ashes and the hot magma comes out on the surface, basically they raises the temperature. Okay, and when the temperature goes high, ultimately the climate will be affected. The gases would be there that could be harmful or harsh. These gases would be dissolved in the atmosphere, and whosoever will inhale the air through the atmosphere, that would be affected from these gases. Ashes, as I have told you, basically that disrupted the vision of the person. After volcanic eruptions, we have the floods. Okay, floods. So how does the floods occurs? So there could be a various reason for the floods to get occurred. Like first is the excessive rainfall. Like we all know, in India, we all waited for the raining season. Why? Because of two reasons. Whenever the rains happen, that will lower the temperature, especially in the summer months. So you can say if you are living in the northern India, even in the some places of southern India, all right, the temperatures nearly or easily reaches 45 degrees Celsius. That is very common. All right, at 45 degrees Celsius, now you could imagine like how hotter is the day. So when the rain comes, basically that lowers the temperature, and that will be a good for the people living in that areas, because now they will get some relief from the high or excessive temperature. That would be the first case. Second case is that for agriculture, like in India, whenever we talk about India, India is the country where the primary activities, it means that agriculture activities are in the higher number. Like we know in economy, there are the three types of sectors: primary sectors, secondary sector, and the manufacture and the tertiary sector. Primary sector is the sector in which the agrarian things comes in, like the agriculture, like the honey domestication, all right, like the fisheries and all. Okay, so basically during the excessive rainfalls, for during the rainfalls, the crops of the farmers, they get benefited because the water helps in to forming the nutrition, and by consuming the nutrition, the plants started growing up. Okay, however, basically we had tried to find out the alternative methods of this rainfall based agriculture, like providing the irrigation through the canals and all, but still the rainfall plays an important role in the cultivation and harvesting of the crops. Okay, that is the first thing. But when the rain happens in the excessive amount, then it turns bad for us. Why? Because it often leads to the accumulation of water in a huge quantity, and that will convert it into the flood after some period of time. All right, that is the first reason. Like the excessive rainfalls provide an excess amount of water more than the need, and that excessive amount of water basically get accumulated and spread over a large area, cause the flood. Okay, second is the river overflow. Like we know, rivers flows in a definite path. All right, and basically since the ancient time, then medieval, and even in the modern times, generally you can see that the river banks are well settled. Okay, people usually prefer to sit by the rivers. Why? Because of the agriculture activities, they will get the water easily. For drinking purpose, they will get the water easily, and even for transportation, like water is the cheaper way of transformation. All right, but during the excessive rainfalls, generally the water accumulated in the river in an amount that it overflows the river banks. It means that the depth of the river is not so sufficient to hold that much of amount of water. So the excessive amount of water started spreading over the area, and that is the river overflow. Got it? And the spreading of the water causes the flood. Thereafter, a dam failure. Like we know, the dams are the water receivers that break and store the water for the hydropower electricity. But sometimes even the dams get filled to holding that much amount of water, and they usually releases the extra water into the definite channels, but that could increase the water flow, and the water flow would be overflow to the areas, or you can say in simple terms, would be spread over the areas. Okay. And these systems like excessive rainfall, river overflow, dam failure, that causes the flood, and that will leading to the submerged land. Okay. Property damage, like in the cases of villages, mainly the crops got damaged, and potential loss of life. Okay. Due to various water injuries. All right. And due to some water diseases and all. Okay. So here we have completed the two, like volcanic eruptions and floods. Now let's move forward. After this, the hurricanes. Okay. Like hurricanes are the powerful tropical storms with strong winds and heavy rains, can devastate coastal regions, causing flooding and wind rain. Like hurricanes generally developed in the oceanic water, all right, due to the high and the low pressure, and basically whenever they develop, so basically they start moving towards the coastal areas from the sea, and the moment they are reaching close to the coastal area, basically that coastal area will experience the strong winds. Okay, the wind velocity is that much of high that it could easily damage the property, it could easily take the lives of the people. All right. And accompanied this, heavy rains also occurred so that the flooding situation could be created, and wind damage could also be there. All right. So these are the things that could be done by the hurricanes. After this, the earthquake. Basically, earthquake is a situation when the ground got shake, or you can say sudden shaking of the ground. Okay, that is known as the earthquake. And basically that is generally happen due to the movement of the tectonic plates. Whenever the plates move here and there, basically they generates the shakes in the lithosphere, all right, or you can say in the earth, and that could be experienced by the surface area also, and that is the earthquake. That could lead to the structural damage and the loss of the life of the people. Thereafter, the landslides, like generally happens on the hilly or the mountain areas, when the rock, soil and debris comes to the slope of the mountain and then could reach the ground areas. All right. And this could bury the homes, the roads and the infrastructure, and the people could even got died while the landslides happen. Okay. Thereafter, the tsunamis, like when the flood occurs in the oceans. Okay, like large ocean waves triggered by the underwater earthquakes or the volcanic eruptions, causing coastal flooding and destruction. All right. At last, the cyclones, like intense circular storms in the Indian Ocean and the South Pacific, similar to the hurricanes, carrying or causing heavy rains and wind damage. Basically, the hurricanes occurred in the Pacific Ocean. That is the name of the tropical storm in the Pacific. And cyclones basically occurred in the Indian Ocean and the South Pacific. However, this is also similar like the hurricane, or you can say it is the another name of powerful tropical storms, but in the Indian Ocean and the South Pacific. Okay. Thereafter, the tornadoes, like rotating columns of air extended from a thunderstorm to the ground, capable of destroying buildings and uprooting trees because of the circulation of high powered wind in a, you can say, small areas. Thereafter, billows, several snowstorms with strong winds and low visibility, leading to the transportation disruption and potential health risk. Why? Because that reduces the temperature up to that percentage, like normal human body could not sustain it. Wildfires, we know uncontrolled fires spreading through forests and grasslands, often exacerbated by drier conditions and the high winds. After this, the last is the pandemic, like widespread outbreaks of infectious diseases affecting the large population, leading to the health crisis and the economic disruptions. All right. So these are the things. So students, basically in this lecture, we have seen the natural disasters. In the next lecture, we will start with the man-made disaster. Till then, just revise the facts and figures that all we have discussed in this lecture and be ready for the another lecture. With this note, let's end this lecture and thank you.